Chapter 1. Brownies and Bombshells. Renee Cox had always considered her living room a sanctuary, a place where chaos stayed politely at the door. Tonight, however, chaos had RSVP'd without warning and was currently giggling on her mother's couch. It started innocently enough. Abigail Needles, Renee's best friend since high school, had swung by with a bag slung over one shoulder and a grin that spelled trouble. Abigail was a walking contradiction. Goth chic with a heart of gold, her eyeliner sharp enough to cut glass but her laughter soft and contagious. "I need a dress," Abigail announced, dropping her bag on the coffee table like it was a declaration of war. "Something that says, I'm mysterious but approachable." Renee arched a brow. "For the party?" "For the party," Abigail confirmed, already marching toward Renee's bedroom. "And before you ask, yes, Mark will be there." "Ah," Renee followed, amused. "The infamous Mark." "Not infamous," Abigail corrected, rifling through Renee's closet like a woman possessed. "Just extremely attractive and possibly my soulmate." Renee chuckled, settling on the edge of the bed. "You say that about every guy with a jawline." "Not true," Abigail said, holding up a sequin dress and making a face. "Too disco. Where's that black wrap dress?" "The one that makes you look like you own a yacht." "Laundry," Renee replied. "Try the burgundy one." They spent 20 minutes debating necklines and hemlines, punctuated by Abigail's dramatic sighs and Renee's dry humor. By the time Abigail settled on a dress and perfected her smoky eye, Renee heard the front door open and the familiar cadence of her mother's laughter. "Mom's home," Renee said, glancing toward the hallway. "Sounds like she brought reinforcements." Sure enough, voices floated in, animated, cheerful, punctuated by bursts of giggles. Renee smiled. Her mother deserved good friends and good nights. She was glad for it. Another 40 minutes passed before Abigail declared herself party ready. They headed back to the living room, Renee expecting to find her mother and her friends chatting over tea like civilized adults. What she found instead stopped her cold. Her mother and two of her closest friends were squeezed together on the couch, plates of brownies balanced precariously on their laps, mugs of tea steaming on the coffee table. That wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the laughter, wild, unrestrained, the kind that left them breathless and teary-eyed. They'd get halfway through a sentence before collapsing into hysterics, clutching each other like schoolgirls. Renee blinked. Everything okay in here?" Before her mother could answer, Abigail grabbed Renee's arm with the urgency of someone defusing a bomb. "We need to go," she hissed, dragging her back down the hall. "Abby, what? Just, oh my God. No, no, no," Abigail muttered, pacing Renee's bedroom like a caged animal. Her hands were on her forehead, her eyeliner smudging as she rubbed her temples. "This cannot be happening." "Abby!" Renee caught her shoulders, alarmed. "What is going on?" Abigail looked at her like a woman facing the gallows. Then she flopped onto the bed with a groan so dramatic it could have won awards. "I'm going to die." "Not helpful," Renee said, sitting beside her. "Talk." Abigail sat up, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Renee. Those brownies," she swallowed hard. "They were for Mark and his friends at the party." Renee frowned. "Okay? They had marijuana in them?" Abigail whispered, like confessing to a crime. "Your mom and her friends are all high as a kite." Renee stared, blinked, stared again. "You're joking." "I wish," Abigail moaned, burying her face in her hands. "I'm officially the worst friend ever." For a beat, silence hung heavy. Then Renee laughed, a short, incredulous burst that startled them both. "Oh my God. This isn't funny," Abigail wailed. "They're probably hallucinating. What if they start talking to the furniture?" Renee bit her lip, fighting another laugh. "Abby, they're eating brownies and giggling. They're fine." "They're not fine." Abigail shot to her feet. "What if they call the cops? What if they call my mom?" "Renee, I'll be grounded until menopause." Renee stood too, her practical brain kicking in. "Okay, calm down. We'll handle it." "How?" Abigail demanded. "You can't just unhigh someone." "No," Renee said, thinking fast. "But we can keep them comfortable, hydrated, and away from sharp objects." Abigail groaned. "I'm doomed." Renee grabbed her phone. "You're not doomed. You're going to your party. I'll take care of this." Abigail hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Renee said, ushering her toward the door. "Go. Be mysterious and approachable." Abigail paused long enough to hug her tight. "You're a saint." "Tell Mark I said hi," Renee called as Abigail fled. When Renee returned to the living room, her mother looked up with glassy eyes and a grin that could light up a city. "Sweetheart," she said solemnly, "did you know brownies are the meaning of life?" Renee sighed, suppressing a smile. "No, Mom, but I'm starting to believe it." Chapter 2. Damage Control. Renee Cox prided herself on being calm under pressure. She could juggle delivery schedules, troubleshoot supply chain hiccups, and even navigate the labyrinth of corporate emails without breaking a sweat. But this was uncharted territory. Her mother and two friends, respectable women who usually debated book club picks and casserole recipes, were now sprawled across the couch like extras in a stoner comedy. The brownies were gone. The tea mugs were empty. And the giggles? Oh, the giggles were relentless. "Sweetheart," her mother said, eyes wide and dreamy. "Did you know laughter is the universe's way of tickling your soul?" Renee blinked. "That's profound, Mom." "It's science," her mother declared, then dissolved into laughter so intense she nearly toppled sideways. One of her friends caught her, which triggered another round of hysterics. Renee took a deep breath. Okay, step 1, keep them safe. Step 2, keep them quiet. Step 3, pray no one posts this on social media. She perched on the armchair, adopting her most soothing tone. "Ladies, how about some water?" "Oh, hydration," one friend squealed, clapping like a toddler. "Water is life." "Yes," Renee said, rising. "Water is life. Stay right here." In the kitchen, she filled 3 glasses, muttering under her breath. "Abigail owes me so much coffee for this." When she returned, her mother was staring at the ceiling with rapt fascination. "Do you think clouds have feelings?" she asked solemnly. Renee handed her a glass. "Drink this and ponder later." Her mother obeyed, though halfway through she paused to whisper, "This water tastes like hope." Renee pinched the bridge of her nose. "Hope? Sure. Why not?" The doorbell rang. Renee froze. The last thing she needed was an audience for this circus. She darted to the door and cracked it open just enough to see Mr. Henderson from next door, holding a casserole dish. "Evening, Renee," he boomed. "Your mom said she'd lend me her lasagna pan." "Right?" Renee said, forcing a smile. "She's busy." Behind her, laughter erupted like fireworks. Mr. Henderson peered past her shoulder. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Renee lied, slipping through the gap and shutting the door behind her. "I'll grab the pan." She sprinted to the kitchen, yanked the pan from the cabinet, and returned with a grin that felt like a hostage situation. "Here you go." "Thanks," he said, eyeing her curiously. "Sounds like a party in there." "Book club," Renee said quickly. "They're very passionate about literature." He chuckled. "Well, enjoy." Renee waited until he disappeared down the walkway before exhaling like she'd just defused a bomb. She turned back to the living room and stopped dead. Her mother was gone. So were the friends. "Mom!" Renee called, panic rising. No answer. She checked the hallway. Empty. The bathroom? Empty. Bedroom? Empty. Then she heard it. Faint giggles from the backyard. She rushed outside to find all 3 women lying on the grass, staring at the stars like philosophers on a cosmic retreat. "Ladies," Renee hissed. "What are you doing?" "Connecting," her mother said dreamily. "The earth is hugging us." Renee crouched, trying to herd them like wayward sheep. "Okay, cosmic connection time is over. Let's go inside." "But the stars," one friend protested, pointing skyward. "They're winking at me." "They'll still be winking tomorrow," Renee said firmly. "Come on." It took 10 minutes, 2 promises of hot cocoa, and 1 near fall into the rose bushes, but she finally got them back inside. She settled them on the couch, wrapped them in blankets, and queued up a nature documentary. Something soothing, something that didn't involve brownies. As David Attenborough's voice filled the room, Renee collapsed into the armchair, exhausted. Her phone buzzed. A text from Abigail. "Made it to the party. Mark looks amazing. How's my favorite disaster?" Renee stared at the screen, then typed back, "Your brownies turned my mom into a philosopher. We'll talk later." 3 dots appeared. Then, "OMG. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you. Don't let them call the cops." Renee snorted. "Working on it." She glanced at her mother, who was now whispering to the blanket like it held the secrets of the universe. Renee shook her head, a laugh bubbling up despite herself. This was not how she planned to spend her Thursday night. But as she watched her mom giggle at a penguin waddling across the screen, Renee couldn't help thinking, maybe chaos wasn't so bad. At least it made life interesting. Chapter 3. The Unexpected Guest. By the time Renee coaxed her mother and her friends into a state resembling calm, blankets, cocoa, and a soothing documentary about penguins, she felt like she'd run a marathon in heels. Abigail's text updates were coming in rapid-fire bursts. "Mark just walked in. He looks like a Greek god. Send help." "Okay, I said hi." He smiled. "I might faint." "Renee, if I marry him, you're giving the toast." Renee grinned despite herself. Abigail's dramatics were a comforting constant in a night that had gone completely sideways. She typed back, "Focus on breathing. And don't mention brownies." Abigail's reply was a string of laughing emojis followed by, "You're a lifesaver. Seriously. Love you." Renee slipped her phone into her pocket and glanced at the clock. If she left now, she could drop Abigail's bag at the party and make sure her friend didn't combust from nerves. Plus, a quick escape from the giggle fest in her living room sounded heavenly. She checked on her mom one last time. "You good?" Her mother looked up, eyes dreamy. "Sweetheart, did you know penguins mate for life?" "That's great, Mom," Renee said gently. "Don't move, okay?" "Wouldn't dream of it," her mother murmured. then giggled at a penguin sliding on its belly. Renee grabbed her keys and Abigail's bag, whispering a silent prayer that the house wouldn't burn down in her absence. The party was in full swing when Renee pulled up to the modest suburban house. Music thumped faintly through the walls, and laughter spilled out every time the door opened. She parked, smoothed her hair, and reminded herself she was just here to drop off a bag, not to socialize. She climbed the steps and knocked. The door swung open to reveal a guy with a man bun and a grin that screamed, "I own 3 guitars." He looked her up and down like she was an unexpected plot twist. Hi," Renee said, holding up the bag. "I'm just dropping this off for Abigail." "Cool," he said, stepping aside. "Come in." "Oh, Abby," he bellowed into the house. "Your friend's here." Before Renee could protest, she was swept inside by the tide of music and chatter. The living room was packed with 20-somethings in varying degrees of trendy chaos, flannels, crop tops, ironic hats. Renee felt like she'd wandered into a Pinterest board titled Youthful Anarchy. Then she saw him, Mark. Abigail hadn't exaggerated. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of smile that could melt glaciers. His dark hair was artfully tousled, his shirt casually unbuttoned at the collar. He looked like he belonged in a magazine spread titled Effortless Charm. And he was walking toward her. "Hey," he said, voice warm and smooth. "You must be Renee." Renee blinked. How do you know my name?" "Abby talks about you," he said, grinning. "A lot." "Oh." Renee's brain scrambled for words. "Hopefully good things." "Only good things," he said, eyes twinkling. "She said you're the smart one." Renee laughed, a little flustered. "That's generous." Mark tilted his head. "You're not staying?" "Just dropping off a bag," Renee said, holding it up like a shield. "I've got stuff." "Important stuff?" His tone was teasing, but his gaze was curious. "Very important," Renee said solemnly. "Penguins. And hydration." He chuckled, and the sound did something strange to her pulse. "Sounds serious." "It is," she said, smiling despite herself. "Abby's in her natural habitat, I see." "She's killing it," Mark said, glancing toward the kitchen where Abigail was holding court like a gothic queen. "But I'm glad you came." Renee hesitated, aware of the warmth in his voice, the way his eyes lingered just a beat too long. She wasn't here for this. She didn't have time for this. And yet, "Well," she said, stepping back. "Mission accomplished. Enjoy the party." Mark's smile widened, slow and deliberate. "See you around, Renee." She nodded, turned, and walked out before her resolve could crumble. But as she slid into her car, her heart was doing a ridiculous little tap dance. She told herself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just a smile. But deep down, she knew better. Chapter 4. A chance encounter. Saturday mornings were sacred to Renee Cox. They were for coffee, quiet, and pretending the world didn't exist for at least an hour. Her favorite cafe, a cozy nook with mismatched chairs and the smell of fresh pastries, was her sanctuary. She pushed open the door, the bell chiming softly, and inhaled the comforting aroma of roasted beans and cinnamon. Perfect. She ordered her usual vanilla latte, extra foam, and claimed a corner table by the window. Pulling out her notebook, she flipped to the page titled, Consulting Dreams. Her handwriting sprawled across the paper in neat bullet points. Identify niche services, research competitive rates, draft initial pitch template. She tapped her pen against the margin, mind buzzing with ideas. If she played her cards right, she could launch her business within 6 months. Maybe sooner. Blind faith, she reminded herself. Timing and blind faith. Renee. The voice startled her so much she nearly dropped her pen. She looked up and froze. Mark. Of course it was Mark. Because the universe had a twisted sense of humor. He stood there, casual in a gray sweater and jeans, holding a coffee cup like he owned the place. His smile was warm, easy, and entirely too distracting. "Hey," she managed, hoping her voice didn't sound as breathless as she felt. "Hi. Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Renee's brain screamed no, run, flee, but her mouth betrayed her. "Sure." He slid into the chair, setting his cup down. "Small world. Apparently," she said, closing her notebook a little too quickly. "Do you come here often?" Mark grinned. "Are we doing the cheesy lines already?" Renee laughed, cheeks warming. "I walked right into that one." "You did," he said, eyes twinkling. "But I'll let it slide." She rolled her eyes, trying to regain composure. "So what brings you here?" "Coffee," he said simply, then leaned in slightly. "And maybe fate." Renee blinked. "That's bold." "True," he said with a shrug. "But I figure life's too short for subtlety." She stared at him, torn between amusement and mild panic. "You're very direct. Is that a bad thing?" "No," she admitted. "Just unexpected." Mark sipped his coffee, watching her with an expression that was equal parts curious and confident. "You looked busy when I walked in. Big plans." Renee hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than inventing a lie. "Business plans." His eyebrows lifted. "Entrepreneur." Trying to be, she said, smiling faintly. Consulting. That's impressive, he said, and she could tell he meant it. What kind? Logistics, she said. Supply chain operations. The stuff most people find boring. I don't, he said. Sounds like you know your stuff. I do, she said, a little defensively. I've been watching my company hire outside consultants for years. I could do what they do better. Mark's smile widened. I like that. Confidence looks good on you. Renee felt her pulse skip. She looked down at her latte, suddenly fascinated by the foam art. Thanks. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe wrapping around them. Then Mark leaned back, casual but deliberate. So, any chance I can convince you to take a break from world domination and grab dinner sometime? Renee's heart did a ridiculous flip. Dinner. Food, he said, grinning. Conversation. No pressure. She opened her mouth to say no, to remind herself she didn't have time for distractions. But what came out was, maybe. Mark's grin turned triumphant. I'll take maybe. Renee shook her head, laughing softly. You're persistent. Always, he said. Especially when it's worth it. And for the first time in a long time, Renee wondered if maybe, just maybe, she could make room for something other than work and ambition. Chapter 5. The Consultant Dream. Sunday mornings were supposed to be lazy, pajamas, coffee, and maybe a guilty pleasure binge of reality TV. But Renee Cox was perched at the kitchen table in leggings and an oversized hoodie, laptop open, spreadsheets glowing like judgmental little gods. Her mother hummed in the background, making pancakes as if Thursday night's brownie debacle had never happened. Renee was grateful for that. The giggle fest had ended without casualties, though she suspected her mom might now have a spiritual connection to penguins. Renee stared at her screen, scrolling through hourly consulting rates she'd been tracking for months. Numbers danced in neat columns. $150 per hour. $200 per hour. $250 per hour. She could do this. She knew she could. Every time her company hired outside consultants to fix problems she could solve in her sleep, it lit a fire in her chest. She'd watched, learned, gathered intel like a spy in sensible heels. She knew the contracts, the loopholes, the margins. All she needed was timing and blind faith. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to draft her first pitch. But then her phone buzzed, flashing Abigail's name. Abby. So, how's my favorite future CEO? Renee? Drowning in spreadsheets. Abby, sounds sexy. Speaking of sexy, guess who asked about you last night? Renee froze. Mark? Abby. Ding ding ding. He wanted to know if you're single. I told him you're married to your career but might consider an affair. Renee? Abby. Abby, relax. He laughed. Said he likes a challenge. Renee groaned, dropping her forehead onto the table. Why are you like this? As if summoned by her despair, Abigail burst through the back door, all black eyeliner and combat boots, carrying a coffee cup like a trophy. Morning sunshine, she chirped, sliding into the chair opposite Renee. You look like you're plotting world domination. I'm plotting survival, Renee muttered. And maybe a business empire. Abigail grinned. Same thing. Renee closed her laptop with a sigh. I'm serious, Abby. I want this. I'm tired of watching other people get paid to do what I can do better. Then do it, Abigail said simply, sipping her coffee. You've got the brains, the drive, and the sass. What's stopping you? Fear, Renee admitted. And money. And everything. Abigail leaned forward, eyes sharp. You've been talking about this for years. If you wait for perfect timing, you'll be 80 and consulting for bingo halls. Renee laughed despite herself. Thanks for the visual. Anytime, Abigail said, smirking. Also, Mark is hot. And interested. Just saying. Renee rolled her eyes. This is not about Mark. Everything is about Mark, Abigail declared. He's like the human equivalent of a golden retriever in a leather jacket. That makes no sense, Renee said, laughing. Exactly, Abigail said, grinning. Neither does your resistance. Renee shook her head, but her smile lingered. She hated how easily Abigail could crack her armor. And maybe, just maybe, she hated how much she was thinking about Mark when she should be thinking about consulting contracts. Abigail stood, stretching dramatically. Anyway, I'm off to buy more eyeliner and possibly a pet snake. Text me if you decide to stop being boring. Renee watched her go, then reopened her laptop. Numbers stared back at her, patient and unyielding. She took a deep breath, fingers poised over the keys. Timing and blind faith. Maybe she could have both. Chapter 6. The party fallout. By Monday morning, Renee thought the brownie incident was officially behind her. Her mother seemed fine, cheerful, humming as she packed her lunch, and Abigail had survived the party without catastrophic embarrassment. Renee even managed to get through her workday without thinking about Mark more than, 50 times. Then the phone rang. Renee answered, balancing her coffee mug in one hand. Hello, sweetheart, her mother said, voice hushed and conspiratorial. We need to talk. Renee froze. Those words never meant anything good. About what? The Brownies, her mother whispered, like the CIA might be listening. I think, I think I liked them. Renee nearly choked on her coffee. Mom, I'm serious, her mother said, sounding almost giddy. I felt so free, like my soul was doing cartwheels. Renee pressed a hand to her forehead. Please tell me you didn't tell anyone. Well, her mother hesitated. I might have mentioned it at brunch. Mom, they were curious, her mother protested. And now, well, we're having a little get-together Friday night. Renee's stomach dropped. What kind of get-together? The kind where we experiment, her mother said delicately. With brownies. Renee stared at the wall, horrified. You're planning a pot party? Don't call it that, her mother said primly. It's a culinary adventure. Renee groaned. Mom, this is illegal. Not if we're discreet, her mother said. And Abigail promised to help. Abigail what? Renee sputtered. She's enabling you? She's very resourceful, her mother said cheerfully. Anyway, you're invited. Renee dropped her head onto the table. I'm not coming to your weed soiree. Fine, her mother said breezily. But don't judge us when we achieve enlightenment. Renee hung up, muttering, I need new friends. And a new family. Her phone buzzed again, Abigail this time. Abby. So, your mom called me. She's adorable when she's rebellious. Renee, you're supposed to be my ally. Abby. I am. I'm making sure they don't burn the house down. Also, Mark asked for your number. Renee froze. What did you say? Abby. I said you're busy plotting world domination but might text him if he's lucky. Renee, Abby. Abby, you're welcome. Renee stared at the screen, torn between strangling her best friend and hugging her forever. Before she could decide, another text popped up, this time from an unknown number. Unknown, hey, it's Mark. Coffee was fun. Dinner still on the table? Renee's heart did a ridiculous somersault. She typed back before she could overthink. Renee, maybe, depends on the menu. 3 dots appeared. Then, Mark, challenge accepted. Renee set her phone down, pulse racing. Between her mother's impending culinary adventure and Mark's persistence, her week was shaping up to be interesting. She opened her laptop, staring at her consulting notes. Timing and blind faith, she reminded herself. And maybe a little chaos. Chapter 7. Mark's persistence. Wednesday evening found Renee wandering the aisles of her favorite bookstore. A quiet refuge tucked between a florist and a bakery. The scent of paper and ink mingled with the faint aroma of fresh bread drifting through the walls. It was her happy place, the one spot where ambition and anxiety took a backseat to stories and silence. She trailed her fingers along the spines of hardcovers, pausing at a section on entrepreneurship. Titles like Leap Before You Look and The Fearless Founder stared back at her, daring her to take the plunge. She picked up one, flipping through pages filled with bold advice and motivational quotes. Thinking about world domination again? The voice was warm, teasing, and unmistakable. Renee turned, heart doing that ridiculous flip it had perfected since Saturday. Mark stood a few feet away, casual in a navy jacket and jeans, holding a paperback like he belonged in every aisle. His smile was easy, confident, and entirely too distracting. Do you just appear everywhere I go? She asked, arching a brow. Only in the good places, he said, strolling closer. Coffee shops, bookstores, your dreams, probably. Renee laughed, shaking her head. You're relentless, persistent, he corrected, eyes twinkling. There's a difference. Debatable, she said, sliding the book back onto the shelf. What are you doing here? Looking for a good read, he said, holding up his book. The Art of Negotiation. Figured it might help me convince you to have dinner with me. Renee blinked, then laughed. You're really committed to this, huh? Absolutely, Mark said, leaning against the shelf like he had all the time in the world. You intrigue me, Renee. She felt her cheeks warm. That's flattering. True, he said simply. You're smart, driven, funny, and you make penguin jokes under pressure. Renee groaned. Abigail told you about that, didn't she? She might have mentioned it, Mark said, grinning. I think it's adorable. Renee rolled her eyes, but her smile betrayed her. You're impossible. And yet, he said, stepping closer, you haven't walked away. She hated that he was right. She hated even more that she didn't want to walk away. Mark tilted his head, voice softening. One dinner, no pressure, just good food and better conversation. Renee hesitated, her practical brain screaming about deadlines and business plans. But another voice, the one that had been whispering since the cafe, said maybe, just maybe, she could allow herself this. Fine, she said, crossing her arms. One dinner. Mark's grin was pure sunlight. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, she agreed, surprising herself with how easy it felt. Perfect, he said, slipping his book under his arm. I'll text you the details. As he walked away, Renee stared at the entrepreneurship shelf, her pulse racing. Timing and blind faith, she reminded herself. Maybe that applied to more than just business. Chapter 8. Coffee and Confessions. Renee stood outside the restaurant, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. The place was chic but not pretentious, warm lighting, rustic wood tables, the faint hum of jazz drifting through the open door. It was the kind of spot where people lingered over wine and laughter, not spreadsheets and deadlines. She took a deep breath. This wasn't a business meeting. It wasn't a networking event. It was dinner. With Mark, who was currently walking toward her like he'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. "Hey," he said, smiling that easy, devastating smile. "You look incredible." Renee glanced down at her simple navy dress, suddenly grateful she'd listened to Abigail's advice about effortless but lethal. "Thanks," she said, hoping her voice didn't sound as breathless as she felt. "You clean up well." Mark grinned. "I try." Inside, the hostess led them to a cozy corner table. Candles flickered, casting soft shadows. Renee slid into her seat, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. "So," Mark said, settling across from her, "tell me something about you that Abigail hasn't already spilled." Renee laughed. "That's a tall order. She's basically my press agent." "True," he said, eyes warm, "but I want the unfiltered version." Renee hesitated, then shrugged. "Okay, I hate olives." Mark blinked. "That's your big reveal?" "It's controversial," she said solemnly. "People judge." He chuckled. "Noted. No olives." "Your turn," she said, leaning in. "Big reveal." Mark thought for a moment, then smiled. "I once tried to start a food blog. Lasted 2 weeks." Renee grinned. "What happened?" "I realized I like eating more than writing," he said, laughing. "Also, I burned a soufflé so badly it set off the smoke alarm." Renee laughed, the sound bubbling up like champagne. "That's impressive." "Thank you," he said, mock bowing. "So, consulting, huh? That's your dream." Renee's smile softened. "Yeah, I've been planning it for a while. Watching my company hire outside help for things I could fix in my sleep. It's frustrating." Mark nodded, listening intently. "So why not start now?" Renee sighed. "Fear. Timing. Money. Take your pick." "Fear's overrated," Mark said gently. "Timing's never perfect. And money, well, you'll figure it out." She stared at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said. "But you're smart. Driven. You've got this." Renee felt something shift, something warm and dangerous. She looked down at her glass, swirling the wine like it held answers. "You're very encouraging. Comes naturally," he said with a grin. "Especially when I believe in someone." Her pulse skipped. She hated how much that meant to her. Hated even more how much she wanted to believe him. The waiter arrived with their meals, breaking the spell. They ate, laughed, traded stories. Mark's disastrous soufflé. Renee's high school debate team glory days. Conversation flowed like water, easy and bright. By the time dessert arrived, a shared slice of chocolate cake, Renee realized something startling. She hadn't thought about work in 2 hours. Not once, and it felt good. As they walked out into the cool night air, Mark turned to her, eyes soft. "So, was that better than spreadsheets?" Renee laughed. "Slightly." "Good," he said, smiling. "Because I'd like to do it again." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that too." Mark's grin widened, slow and certain. "Perfect." And for the first time in a long time, Renee felt like maybe blind faith wasn't just for business. Chapter 9. A big opportunity. Thursday morning started like any other. Coffee, emails, and Renee silently questioning why corporate memos always sounded like they were written by robots. She was halfway through a spreadsheet when her phone buzzed with a notification that made her heart stop. Subject: Consulting proposal opportunity. From Regional Operations Director. She clicked faster than human reflex should allow. The email was short, almost casual, but the words hit like fireworks. "We're considering bringing in an independent consultant for the upcoming logistics overhaul. If you know anyone qualified, let us know. We'd like to move quickly." Renee stared at the screen, pulse racing. This was it. The opening she'd been waiting for. The kind of project that could launch her dream into reality. She could do this, she knew she could. But the thought of pitching herself? Terrifying. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, drafting and deleting sentences like a woman possessed. "Hi. I'd like to recommend myself." Delete. Too desperate. "I have extensive experience in logistics and operations." Delete. Too stiff. She groaned, dropping her forehead onto the desk. Timing and blind faith, she reminded herself. But blind faith felt a lot scarier when it involved hitting send. Her phone buzzed again. Mark. "Mark? Good morning, future CEO." Renee smiled despite herself. "Morning. Mark, you sound stressed. Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, then typed, "Big opportunity. Big panic. Mark, call me." Before she could overthink, she hit dial. He answered on the first ring. "Hey," he said, voice warm and steady. "What's going on?" Renee exhaled. "My company needs a consultant for a major project. I could do it. I want to do it. But pitching myself feels insane." "Insane in a good way," Mark said. "You've been planning this for months. This is your shot." "I know," she said, voice tight. "But what if they laugh? What if they say no? What if they say yes?" Mark countered. What if this is the start of everything you've been dreaming about? Renee closed her eyes, letting his words sink in. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said gently. But you're ready. And if you need someone to proof your email or cheer you on, I'm your guy. She laughed softly. You're ridiculous. Ridiculously supportive, he said. Now send the email, Renee, before fear talks you out of it. She stared at the blinking cursor, heart pounding. Then, slowly, she typed, Hi, director's name. I'd like to express my interest in the consultant role for the logistics overhaul. With my experience in operations and supply chain management, I'm confident I can deliver exceptional results. I'd love the chance to discuss how I can help make this project a success. She read it twice, fingers trembling, then hit send. Mark's voice came through the phone like sunlight. You did it. I did it, she whispered, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. Good, he said. Now breathe, and maybe celebrate with dinner tonight. Renee laughed, the tension melting just a little. You never quit, do you? Not when it matters, Mark said softly. And you matter. Her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with work. Dinner sounds good. Perfect, he said. I'll pick you up at 7. As she hung up, Renee stared at her sent email, adrenaline humming through her veins. Timing and blind faith, she thought. And maybe a little help from someone who believed in her more than she believed in herself. Chapter 10. Misunderstandings and Makeups. Friday morning started with a buzz, literally. Renee's phone lit up with an email notification that made her heart leap. Subject: Consulting proposal discussion. We'd like to schedule a meeting to review your proposal. Can you join us Monday at 10 a.m.? Renee stared at the screen, pulse racing. This was it. The door she'd been waiting for had swung wide open. She was halfway through a celebratory dance in her kitchen when another message popped up, this time from Mark. Mark, can't wait for tonight. Hope you're ready for the best pasta in town. She smiled, typing back, looking forward to it. Everything felt perfect until it didn't. The trouble started at lunch. Renee was at her desk, juggling emails, when a coworker strolled by with a smirk. So, you're pitching for the consultant role? Old move. Renee blinked. How do you know that? Mark mentioned it, the coworker said casually. Said he was impressed. Renee froze. Mark mentioned it? Yeah, the coworker said, already walking away. Guess you two are pretty close. Renee's stomach twisted. Mark knew people at her company? He never said that. Was he connected to management? Was this dinner some kind of networking ploy? By the time she left work, doubt had wrapped around her like a vice. She replayed every conversation, every smile, every encouraging word. Was he genuine? Or was she just a stepping stone? Dinner was at a charming little Italian place with twinkling lights and the smell of garlic that could make angels weep. Mark was already there, waving her over with that easy grin. But tonight, Renee couldn't summon her usual warmth. You okay? He asked as she slid into the booth. Fine, she said too quickly. Just tired. Mark studied her, concern flickering in his eyes. Work stress. Something like that, she said, picking up the menu like it was a shield. They ordered, but the conversation felt stilted. Mark tried, asked about her weekend plans, cracked jokes, but Renee's mind was a storm of suspicion. When he excused himself to take a quick call, she stared at her water glass, heart pounding. Was she overreacting? Or was she about to make the biggest mistake of her life? Enter Abigail. Renee's phone buzzed with a text. Abby. How's pasta boy? Renee, complicated. Abby, spill. Renee hesitated, then typed. He knows people at my company. What if this is all business? Abigail's reply was instant. Abby, girl. He's not wooing you for a logistics contract. He's wooing you because you're hot and brilliant. Stop spiraling. Renee bit her lip. What if you're wrong? Abby, I'm never wrong. Now go eat carbs and kiss him later. Renee laughed despite herself, tension cracking just a little. Leave it to Abigail to cut through the noise with sass and certainty. When Mark returned, Renee took a breath. So, you know people at my company? Mark blinked, then chuckled. Oh, yeah, my cousin works in HR. Why? Renee stared. Your cousin? Yeah, he said, smiling. I mentioned your pitch because I'm proud of you, not because I'm trying to pull strings. If that's what you're worried about. Renee felt heat flood her cheeks. I might have overthought. Mark reached across the table, his hand warm over hers. You're allowed. But for the record, I'm here for you, Renee. Not your company. Something in his voice, steady, sincere, melted the last of her doubt. She exhaled, laughing softly. Sorry, I'm not great at trusting. Good thing I'm persistent, he said, eyes twinkling. Now, can we get back to the part where I feed you the best tiramisu in town? Renee smiled, relief washing over her like sunlight. Deal. And as they shared dessert, laughter bubbling between them, Renee realized something important. Blind faith wasn't just for business. Sometimes it was for love too. Chapter 11. Leap of Faith. Monday morning dawned bright and sharp, the kind of day that felt like a clean slate. Renee stood in front of her bathroom mirror, smoothing the collar of her blouse, her stomach a knot of nerves and adrenaline. Today wasn't just another workday. Today was the day she walked into her boss's office and said the words that had been simmering in her chest for years. I'm leaving. Her laptop bag felt heavier than usual as she drove to the office, her mind replaying every possible scenario. Panic, regret, triumph. She parked, took a deep breath, and whispered her mantra. Timing and blind faith. The meeting with the operations director was scheduled for 10. Renee arrived early, clutching her proposal like a lifeline. When she stepped into the conference room, her heart thudded against her ribs. The director smiled warmly. Renee, thanks for coming. We were impressed with your email. Thank you, she said, voice steady despite the storm inside. I appreciate the opportunity. They discussed the project, scope, timelines, deliverables. Renee spoke with confidence, her passion shining through every word. When the director leaned back and said, We'd like to move forward with you as our consultant, Renee almost forgot how to breathe. Congratulations, he added. You'll need to transition out of your current role, of course. Renee nodded, pulse racing. Of course. By the time she left the room, her decision was crystal clear. She wasn't just quitting her job. She was stepping into the life she'd dreamed of, and it felt terrifying, and exhilarating, and absolutely right. That evening, Renee sat at her kitchen table, drafting her resignation email. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly. Then her phone buzzed. Mark. Mark, how'd it go? Renee, they said yes. Mark, I knew they would. Proud of you. Renee, thanks. I'm terrified. Mark, good. Means you're doing something big. Check your door. Renee frowned, rising to open the front door, and froze. Mark stood there, grinning, holding a bottle of champagne in one hand and a small box in the other. What is this? She asked, laughing in surprise. A celebration, he said, stepping inside. And a little something to make your leap official. He handed her the box. Inside was a sleek, engraved pen. The inscription read, Blind faith looks good on you. Renee stared, throat tightening. Mark, sign your resignation with that, he said softly. And then sign your first contract, because you're going to crush this. Her eyes stung, and before she could stop herself, she wrapped her arms around him. He held her close, warm and steady, like an anchor in the storm. Thank you, she whispered. Always, he murmured. Now pop that champagne. You've got a business to launch. As the cork flew and laughter filled the room, Renee realized something profound. Blind faith wasn't just about chasing dreams. It was about trusting the people who believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. And maybe, just maybe, it was about love too. Chapter 12. Love and Logistics. 2 weeks later, Renee sat in her favorite cafe, the same corner table where she'd once scribbled dreams in a notebook, staring at an email that made her heart race. Subject: Contract confirmation. We're thrilled to have you on board for the logistics overhaul. Please review and sign the attached agreement. She read it twice, then a third time just to make sure her eyes weren't playing tricks. It was real. Her first official consulting contract. The leap she'd taken wasn't just blind faith anymore. It was solid ground. Her phone buzzed. Mark. Mark. How's my favorite consultant? Renee officially hired. Mark, knew it. Dinner tonight. My treat. Renee, you're spoiling me. Mark, someone has to. You've been living on caffeine and ambition. Renee laughed, typing back. Fine. But I'm picking dessert. Dinner was at a rooftop restaurant with fairy lights strung like stars, and a view of the city glowing against the night sky. Renee arrived with her heart still humming from the day's victory. Mark was already there, leaning casually against the railing, looking like trouble wrapped in charm. Congratulations, he said, pulling her into a hug that felt like home. You did it. We did it, she teased. You were my unofficial cheerleader. Best job I've ever had, he said, grinning. Now sit, eat, celebrate. They ordered champagne, clinking glasses as laughter bubbled between them. Renee told him about the contract details, the scope of the project, the terrifying thrill of being her own boss. Mark listened like every word mattered, his eyes warm and proud. You know, he said, leaning in, I've never seen anyone look this good while talking about supply chain optimization. Renee laughed. That's because no one else cares. I care, he said softly, because it's you. Her breath caught, and for a moment, the city lights blurred behind him. She reached across the table, fingers brushing his. Thank you for believing in me. Always, he said, squeezing her hand. Now, about dessert. Renee grinned. Chocolate cake. Non-negotiable. Done, he said, signaling the waiter. But only if you promise to share. Maybe, she teased. Depends on how charming you are. Mark's smile turned wicked. Challenge accepted. Later, as they stood under the fairy lights, the city humming below, Mark pulled her close. You know, he murmured, I think blind faith looks good on you. Renee smiled, heart full. Turns out it looks good on us. And when he kissed her, soft, certain, full of promise, She knew this wasn't just the start of her business. It was the start of everything. Chapter 13. Brownies Revisited. Renee's apartment buzzed with laughter and the smell of chocolate. Abigail stood in the kitchen like a gothic Martha Stewart, pulling a tray of brownies from the oven with a flourish. "Relax," she announced, waving a spatula like a magic wand. "These are strictly legal. No surprises this time." Renee grinned, arranging champagne flutes on the counter. "Thank God. I don't think my mom's ready for another spiritual awakening." "Speak for yourself," her mother called from the living room, where she and two friends were perched on the couch, sipping sparkling water and gossiping like teenagers. "Those brownies were life-changing." "Mom," Renee groaned, laughing. "Please don't start." Abigail smirked. "She's not wrong. That night was iconic." "Iconic for you?" Renee said, rolling her eyes. "I was running a rehab center in my bedroom." "Details," Abigail said breezily, slicing the brownies into perfect squares. "Tonight is about celebration. You're officially a business owner, and I'm officially your #1 fan." "#1. Mark's voice floated in from the doorway. He stepped inside, carrying a bouquet of lilies and wearing that grin that made Renee's pulse skip every time. "Pretty sure I've got that title locked down." Abigail snorted. "You can share the throne, pasta boy." Mark laughed, setting the flowers on the counter before pulling Renee into a hug that felt like home. "Congratulations, consultant extraordinaire." "Thanks," she said softly, smiling up at him. "Couldn't have done it without my cheer squad." "Cheer squad?" Abigail scoffed. "We're more like a hype empire." "True," Mark said, stealing a brownie. "And for the record, these are amazing. Better than the originals," Abigail teased. "Safer than the originals," Renee muttered, earning a round of laughter. They gathered around the table, plates piled high with brownies, champagne fizzing in their glasses. The conversation flowed, stories, jokes, plans for the future. Renee looked around at the people she loved most, her heart full to the brim. When the laughter quieted and the night softened into something tender, Mark leaned close, his voice low. "You know," he murmured, "this all started with brownies." Renee smiled, eyes sparkling. "And blind faith. Best combination ever," he said, kissing her gently, sweet and certain. Abigail groaned dramatically. "Ugh, you two are disgustingly cute." "Get used to it," Renee said, laughing as she clinked her glass against Mark's. "Because this is just the beginning." And as the night shimmered with laughter and love, Renee realized something simple and profound. Dreams weren't just about timing and blind faith. They were about the people who made the leap worth taking, and the moments that turned chaos into magic.